To anyone that's tuned in to the last three episodes and have made it all the way through, thank you very much for listening. I get that this kind of podcast could be quite draining, as the subjects discussed can also be triggering, which is why with anything that I talk about, I leave resources down below. I try to make these formally informal, as I try to be unapologetically myself in these podcasts. I will admit this episode has taken me a little bit longer to produce than normal, so if this hasn't released in line with the schedule I wanted to put out for these podcasts, being every Thursday, I do apologise if this is one that has taken me a good few more attempts to record, then hey ho. But it's hard. It is hard to talk about certain subjects at times. How do you word it? How do you narrow down on a point? How do you go wide? Give a topic a wide berth to narrow it down into a nice conclusion. It's something you get taught at university. Is when you ever writing a paper, you go broad with your subject and you narrow it down and summarize it right at the end. And I've tried to direct with my previous recordings of this episode in particular. I've tried to direct it off many different things and tried to all wrap it up nicely in a little bow tie and to pass it on to you guys for you guys to listen to and comment on. But honestly, if I could summarize what it is that I would like to talk to you guys about today, it's just how valuable your time is. How valuable honesty is. Relationships and independency is more what I've been going with. And something that occurred to me very recently is that when you're younger, you get taught to share, you get taught to care, you get taught to time manage. It's normally directed towards a commonality, whether that be within your relationships, whether that be in your work life, whether you be in your social life, family life. It's normally directed towards necessities in life. It's never directed towards yourself. And you have to get to a point where you should allow yourself to be selfish, especially when it comes to your own well-being. Your well-being, you, number one, are important. And if any of you feel that you aren't important, you are. You are all important. That is something I want to drive home. Admittedly, I don't always practice what I preach, but then no one does. No one does. It's one of the givens in life is you always care for everyone else rather than yourself, because for the most part you don't get deemed to be important. When you go into the workplace, you're told you're not indisposable and you could be replaced within a week. But that's at your job. You know, when you if you try to get valued at your job, it's where you end up doing the most damage to yourself. The value should come from the people around you that love and support you, not the people around that care for your well-being so you can contribute to societal pressures. And if you can be honest with yourself and come to terms with that, it gets a lot easier to carry on. I think that's why it's so difficult for people to stay in jobs or have a job these days. It's because there's high pressures, because there is a lot more supply and demand now than there was 20 years ago. So much more. I mean, people can tell me that I'm wrong, and people are more than happy to do so. This is my opinion. Supply and demand has never been higher. consumerism has never been higher. But as that's increased, so has inflation. And as much as you see high street stores closing on a regular basis, all these big conglomerates that have come up, like Amazon and Google, and I'm going to go with Tesla just to make it seem like a list, because I had a list in my head and it went. People want them big, nice and shiny. That's all they want. So yeah, when you want those things, you will give away as much as of your time as you physically can to do that. Where are you giving yourself time? Where you're giving yourself the ability to decompress, to recuperate, to de-stress. Probably the same word as decompress, but again, list, I'm running with it. Where do you get time for those? If you don't give yourself that, you need to start to. And I know this kind of comes across as very like on the ball, on the ball, on the nose, and easier said than done. And this kind of comes across as more of a PSA than a podcast, and I do apologise. It's just something that I am very passionate about more these days than I used to be. Because when you go through life assumed that you don't care about anyone else and that you're not selfish, that you're selfish, even though you give so much of your time away and so much of your mind, your spirit, your body, blood, sweat, tears, whatever it is, you don't create any, you don't give yourself enough time to be selfish. You shouldn't be having to share yourself with yourself, if that makes any form of sense. But this is something you get taught when you're younger. You get taught to share, you get taught to time manage, you get taught all of this so you can contribute to a big wide world where in reality no one cares. No one cares about you. Everyone's just in a job to make money, to live. That's the blunt end of it. And I know I know for the most part, for anyone listening, and if you have even started to tune off at this point, fair enough. But hear me out and bear with me. As I say, widen the point, bring down to summarize. I'm getting annoyed with myself. That's why I'm talking very much because I have tried to record this so many times because I am passionate about this sort of thing. I am passionate about trying to help people in probably one of the most unconventional ways by throwing myself onto the internet and saying, here I am, another voice in the room. Until I get guests on, this is it. This is what you got to deal with. This is what you get. Essentially. As tacky as it is and everything else. My point is, it's just be nicer to yourself and allow yourself as much time as you need. You are not responsible for anyone else's well-being other than your own. And you can't be responsible for anyone else's well-being if you're not looking after your own. If you're specifically in a job where it requires you to care about others' well-being, then fine. But when you're in a retail job, just go to work, stock shelves, do whatever it is that you do. And hats off to the carers that stick it in the industry for 20, 30 years, because I did 2 years of it and I loved it, but it sucked the soul out of me. purely because the level of care that we provide to people, especially in this country being England, people need more than what they're being provided. I remember back in COVID when I was going door to door to look after the elderly or the people that weren't capable of looking after themselves, whether that be physically or mentally. And the amount of professional boundaries that are in place that are designed to safeguard, my personal belief is there are far too many. You know, there is this expectation of formalities, but no one can be that cold to someone that's vulnerable. They're a person at the end of the day. Showing them a bit of care. If I could find another term for love in this sense, I will. But love is the word I'm using, and if there is a better word for it, comment down below. But during that time especially, you were someone's only person they talk to in a day. You had to be their friend, family member, their counsellor, all in one. And that put commissions backs up. Because you're dropping your professional boundaries, you shouldn't be informal with people, you have to be formal to safeguard yourself so it doesn't lead to abuse or it doesn't lead to this. Yes, and in some cases, fine. But how is someone meant to trust you to look after them in their most vulnerable when you're coming in like you're, a head doctor for a GP? And I probably said that all wrong, but I'm not in that sort of field, so I can't attest to that. My point is, I don't even know what my point is with that one. I kind of just divulged onto that tangent based on my own experiences. But that's where, yeah, you do have to be careful with how much you give yourself to people, especially in a job like that. But going the extra step to make sure someone is doing better, you are doing better for someone in their day to day lives because of the support you give them, is a beautiful thing. And it's something that often gets overlooked. It's honestly, if it wasn't for the constraint that it ended up taking on me, I would happily go back and do it. And I would recommend it to anyone to go out into the community in a domiciliary position or whatever and look after people, because you get to know some amazing people with amazing stories to tell. I met one, God rest her soul, who she, you know, she was so with it. She was so switched on. And she had some amazing stories. And she gained enough trust to allow me to support her in a position where she was the most vulnerable. I'm not going to go into graphic detail of it because I don't think that is allowed on YouTube. But if anyone with a decent imagination and a good thought process when it comes to those sort of subjects, you'll get the idea of what I'm talking about. She allowed me to help her in that sort of vulnerable position, even though I was a bloke. That probably narrows it down quite nicely. Should have probably led with that. And the feeling I got from it was, can't even know. I don't even know how to describe the feeling. The feeling you get when you know that someone trusts you that much, despite differences, being age and gender in this scenario, is a good feeling. And those are the times when dedicating your energy into supporting someone like that, you it doesn't actually use up a lot. Because that's the element of comfortability. But you do need to know when it's taking too much of a toll. When your involvement into a person's life, whether that be professionally or unprofessionally, I'm losing the words today. Really losing the words this week. I'm going to go with professionally and commonly. I don't know. It's gone. But commonly, in your day-to-day lives, you wouldn't, to dive, to give yourself so much of your energy and your time and everything else into someone that doesn't reciprocate it back to you in that sense are the people that aren't worth your time. Yeah, there is a lot of argument very much for give and take within relationships. In a professional one, as I say, and it wasn't me making a comparison between, I should expect something back off of my clients because I'm giving my time to them. No, you are paid to do a job where that is involved. The point I was trying to make is more that it is okay for that to be the case. It's just so long as that you're taking more of a effort to decompress and de-stress afterwards. It's more in your personally, that's the word I was looking for. I'm sure if someone did comment by the time this released or listened to this, would have put, it's personally, is the word you're looking for. I got there in the end, so thank you anyway. Personally, you shouldn't be dedicating that much time unless, subjective, it's required, like looking after a loved one. I'm talking about the friendships where it's 50-50. You can go all in, they can go all in, or it's equal. It's an equilibrium where you can be honest, where you can be unapologetically yourselves, where you're not masking for approval, where you're not hiding yourself because of the worry of disapproval. Those sort of relationships where it doesn't take that much of your energy to have it. Obviously, sometimes it can be 60-40, other times it can be 40-60. You kind of always want to aim for 50-50 within a relationship, whether it be romantically or, socially. But within all those dynamics, honesty is also important, and that was kind of what I wanted to come home on is honesty, being honest with a person without the fear of judgment, negativity, or contempt. Because at the end of the day, when you can be honest with a person and they can be honest with you, it creates a foundation of trust. If you can't be honest with someone, you don't trust them. And even if you think that you can, you can't, I'm afraid. Annoyingly, I've had to learn that the hard way. And this isn't to say that, this isn't to rain on anyone's thoughts on that notion of, I can't be honest with anyone I know, but I trust them all. Yes, but subjectively, that trust only lies on conditioning. I'm talking about unconditional trust, unconditional honesty, unconditionally devoting. That was another word I was looking for. Devotion to a relationship. Being, you know, people want, people should want your honesty, not your conformity. You know, you should. Obviously, we have a tendency to, what's the word? Mercy, be merciful. It's probably better that I provide an example in this case. If someone comes up to you and say, "Does this outfit make me look fat?" Obviously, you say no in that regard. Kind of doesn't matter on what kind of relationship you have with that person, whether you can, even if you can get away with saying that, you shouldn't. If someone comes up to be you and go, "Can you be honest with me? Should I invest 3 million into a football club?" I don't know why I went off the back of Ryan Reynolds when he asked his wife if he should make that investment into a football club, but look at where Wrexham are now. They're laughing, so it kind of all works out. But my point that I was trying to make here is, do you think it's a good idea if I invest 3 million into a football club and someone goes no? You kind of, that anything like that is risky. The trouble is when you're establishing relationships and trying to maintain them, as much as honesty is important and trust is important, having to put other people's feelings into regard is a risky process. You shouldn't want to go out your way to upset someone. You wouldn't want to go out of your way to upset someone. It's difficult. It's tough. It's. I know I've had it before when someone goes no, and probably context would be good here. I know that I've asked someone if I've lost weight before, and someone's going, "No, you've actually put on." Yeah, that's hurt. Yeah, that hurt. But I'm the type of person I'd be like, well, at least they're being honest. Typically speaking, you would want to be that way, but I think the point I was trying to make was it can be risky and it can be hurtful. There's so many variables when it comes down to that. You don't want to hurt people, and I'm trying to round this around this complete tangent in a way that doesn't portray the wrong thing here. I mean, if I can summarize it in any way, it's more of just be honest, just be an honest individual, and don't hurt anyone in that process. You know, there are so many words that I wanted to use that I could not remember for the life of me, which I'm gonna have to ask my partner because I just lost them. They were there and then they're gone. I'm sorry if these podcasts seem a little bit all over the place and there is no linear path, but then that's the whole point, is that there is no linear path, and I will probably say this randomly within an episode or at the end of an episode of every episode that I do of this podcast while I'm doing this on my own. because I'm talking essentially to you guys. Whereas when I start to have guests, I'll be talking to other people. And it'll be more of a conversation rather than me just talking into a microphone like every other YouTuber and going, hey, this is a bunch of issues that I want to talk to you about today. If you have managed to make it all the way through of this organised mess of a podcast, of an episode, thank you very much. If you're going through anything and need any help, I will reiterate, there are resources down below. Feel free to speak up if you don't agree with anything that I've said or would like me to try and elaborate on it in a slightly different way. Because if you got the notion that I was saying that you should basically call your friends fat, no, that wasn't what I was trying to say. You know, you got to take everyone's feelings into regard, and everyone will tell a little white lie. No one wants to be outwardly called that. That's, and if you suffer with obesity and any form of eating disorder as the result of your weight, again, look at the resources down below. At the end of the day, this is meant to be a learning experience for anyone, for everyone. I want people to be able to express themselves unapologetically and for people to begin to comprehend other people's day-to-day lives. I'm still learning myself. I do not ever want to intend on triggering anyone. Never. All I want to do is help. And with that being said, thank you very much for listening if you made it all the way through to the end. And remember, towards improving mentally every day, it takes time. I'll see you guys next week.